Yes, I was on All My Children for 3 years. I thought it was interesting that the hand raising was if you had heard of All My Children, not if you'd watched. So I'm not going to call out any like soap watchers in the audience. I won't make you fess up. For me, it was a generational thing. As a kid growing up, I watched it with my mom and grandma after school on VHS tapes. Remember those? Yeah. Actually, when we started, it was on beta. Who remembers those? Yeah, beta. Oh, good times. I'm really dating myself here. But of all the acting jobs I could have gotten, it was a dream come true. So as a tribute to my time on All My Children, I wanted to share my little piece of AMC history, the 3-year arc of my character, Laura Kirk English, summed up in 60 seconds. Okay? I was a homeless teenage orphan from New York who ran away to Pine Valley for a better life, got adopted by Brooke English, survived a fire, appendicitis, and a kidnapping, all separate occasions, learned to read, dated Scott Chandler, the richest, hottest guy in town, volunteered at a youth center until compromising photos from my past turned up online, which I had taken at the tender age of 15, only to earn money to pay for my mom's tuberculosis medication. But I was so ashamed I set fire to the photos in the basement of our SRO, and I thought I had put out the fire, but tragically the building burned down and my mom was too sick to escape. So all this time I was racked with guilt over being responsible for my own mother's death. Then Jim, the guy who took the photos, turned up in Pine Valley, conned Brooke into falling in love with him. So finally I had to confess to Brooke everything that had happened, and as any loving, protective mother would do, she sent me to China to live with some friends and shot Jim in cold blood. So, no big deal, just pretty typical, relatable stuff. All you non-soap watchers are feeling real superior right about now. Yeah, I bet you are. We would get feedback from fans about the storylines, and I found it really interesting when Laura and Scott Chandler were dating. When the relationship got serious, they planned to have sex for the first time on prom night, but in the moment, Laura couldn't go through with it. And then I got mail. Now, yes, some of it was good for Laura, she should wait until she's ready, but most of it was, what is wrong with you? Scott's amazing. I mean, if you don't sleep with him, he's gonna move on. Every girl in Pine Valley would kill to be with him. And I'm reading this stuff in disbelief. I mean, Laura was 16, but the typical viewer was criticizing her for not sleeping with her boyfriend. Like, what is wrong with this picture? And no one knew, but all of that was hitting me in a very personal way because of what I had been through as a teen in my own life, just a year before starting the show. It was really ironic. There I was, living my dream at 19, acting on national TV. I should have been so happy and fulfilled, but behind the scenes, I was struggling with depression and an eating disorder. Now, granted, that was partly due to the stress of moving to Manhattan at 19, living alone without a support system, feeling tremendous pressure from the industry to look a certain way, to be a certain size. But underneath all of that, there was a deep sense of unworthiness and ultimately self-condemnation. It's something that's familiar to far too many women who suffer with guilt and regret after aborting a child. It's a story that usually goes untold, and that's why I feel so privileged to be here with you all tonight and share some of my journey and maybe give a different picture of the consequences of abortion from a mother's perspective. We know that abortion takes the lives of innocent children, and we need to save them because every human life has God-given value, including the unborn. They are people too. This is something even children themselves can understand, thanks to the wisdom of Dr. Seuss. A person's a person, no matter how small. You saw those little 12-week-old models on your table. That's a person too. And somehow we make it so complicated. But each and every unborn child is precious to God, and so is every mother. God has a plan for them both. And when a woman facing unplanned pregnancy can turn to a place like Pathway of Hope, she experiences love and support that can make all the difference in a time of confusion and crisis. That's support I didn't have when I was 18, support that I didn't know existed. But before I get to that part of the story, I should back up a little bit, okay? Let me set the scene here. I grew up in a Christian home, and as a kid, I was an overachieving, church choir singing, authority-pleasing, academic award-winning, just total goody-goody. And I was really close to my family, even as a teenager. In fact, I was so good for so many years, my parents and I figured I was gonna stay that way forever. So they thought, clearly we don't need to talk about the dangers of alcohol and sex with little Miss Perfect over here. It's just not a problem. Well, fast forward to senior year, my hormones had kicked in with a vengeance. I wanted some independence from my family. Got a little social life, involved a little social drinking. Needless to say, hormones and alcohol make a dangerous combination. I had this major crush, we'll call him Adam. He asked me to homecoming, and it was downhill from there. Now, that was many years ago. I'm not going to tell you how many, but let's just say pre-internet, pre-cell phones, okay? That's all I'm going to say, just leave it at that. Being a teenager was hard enough back then. It is so much worse for teens now, with not only peer pressure, but the messages they're getting from society, school, online, social media, on their smartphones, in their pockets, literally everywhere they go. So let me pause right here and say to all the parents in the room, I'm sure there are quite a few of you, talk to your kids about tough issues. I don't care how good they are, how Christian they are, how good their grades are, whatever. They need to hear from you on tough issues. Everything from dating, relationships, and sex to alcohol, drugs, and peer pressure. They need to know that they can come to you about these critical issues. Yes, those conversations are difficult, they're uncomfortable. You gotta be a grown-up and get over it, okay? You need to get those conversations started. And if you need some help, just ask someone at the center. They're here for you. They have great resources. Unfortunately, in my case, that communication just wasn't happening. There wasn't any influence in my life telling me about God's design for healthy relationships or saving sexual intimacy for marriage. So as my relationship with Adam progressed, by the time graduation rolled around, sex seemed like the natural next step. I mean, he said he loved me, and I thought I loved him, and I thought that made it okay. Ironically, we were both smart kids in school, but we were clueless in practical matters, so we weren't concerned about STDs, and I thought I had birth control taken care of until the end of my freshman year in college, when one day I discovered I was pregnant. I had a 4.0 that semester, and I had never felt so stupid in my life. I mean, pregnant at 18, I felt like a statistic. I mean, how can I let this happen? I was devastated. I immediately picked up the phone and called someone who was a trusted confidant in my life at that time. And as I cried hysterically, she assured me it would all be okay. She could help. She knew of a good abortion clinic. She could make the arrangements for me. I could make it go away, keep it a secret, just go on with my life as planned. And like so many women, I felt trapped. I believed abortion was morally wrong, the taking of an innocent life, but I was scared and ashamed and desperate. There was no other way out. And when I told Adam, he reacted the exact same way. He was a devout Catholic and had always been just absolutely pro-life. But when it was us facing that decision, whole different story. Teenage pregnancy didn't fit with his life plan either. I mean, there was no choice. We had to just make it go away. What a crazy mix of emotions. Fear, sorrow, being horrified with myself that I was actually able to go through with it, being terrified afterwards, experiencing the physical pain. Worst of all, being relieved that the problem was solved. And then being horrified with myself for being relieved. A baby is not a problem to be solved. And ending a pregnancy, it doesn't undo anything. It doesn't erase it. It doesn't make it go away. There are lasting effects. Now, in my case, the only positive effect was a determination that I would never make that choice again. If I were to get pregnant, I'd be having a baby. Didn't want to have a baby until I got married, so to be 100% certain on that was real easy math. I resolved to save sex for marriage, and I still do, and that's a good thing. But that one good thing is like a single drop of water in a whole ocean of regret. I didn't realize the grief and regret and self-condemnation would go on for years. It kept spiraling, unforgiveness, depression, punishing my body with cycles of extreme diet and exercise, and then binge eating. I was living Romans 7:15 every day. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. I was enslaved and miserable. It wouldn't be until almost 10 years after the abortion that I would even begin to understand true forgiveness and freedom. And that happened at a pregnancy resource center in Los Angeles, California. You see, after my 3 years on All My Children, I moved from New York to LA, and by that time I was so hungry and thirsty for God. My very first Sunday in LA, I went to a Calvary Chapel church, and the warmth and love in that room just washed over me. And the message was on the year of Jubilee, which is the year in Jewish tradition when slaves are set free. And I just wept. I couldn't believe how much that message was for me. I mean, I'd been a Christian basically my whole life, but I finally realized what I had been missing: relationship with Jesus. And whoa, you mean the Bible actually has application for my life? Like, this is revolutionary information. I finally understood the concept of being born again into a new way of living for God instead of myself or others. I got baptized for rededication on the beach in Santa Monica. And since I had committed my life to Christ, I thought my eating disorder and depression would be a thing of the past, because that's how that works, right? Not necessarily. I got worse. Eventually to the point where I was barely functioning. I turned to the leader of my church women's ministry, who was a professional counselor, and she helped me put together a treatment plan. I began working with a therapist, a psychiatrist, a nutritionist, every kind of ist that could possibly help me. I was like, sign me up, because I need some help. And as I started recovering from the depression and the eating disorder, I began to understand how traumatized I was by my abortion. I had heard at church about this thing called the Pregnancy Resource Center, and I thought, maybe I could help other women somehow, help save them from the pain that I'd gone through. But I knew I had to deal with my own baggage and learn how to forgive myself before I could possibly help anyone else. I recognized that the unforgiveness was a yoke of slavery for me. I couldn't be claiming life in Christ while I was constantly condemning myself. And Galatians 5:1 became my life verse. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. I desperately wanted that kind of freedom in my life. And I realized that Jesus hadn't just died for my sin to pay the price for my salvation, but for me to live in freedom in this life. In John 10:10, in the Amplified translation, Jesus says, I came that they may have and enjoy life and have it in abundance to the full till it overflows. If Jesus came to give us that kind of life and joy and freedom, and we're not experiencing it, like something is wrong. There's a disconnect. We have to refuse to settle for anything less than everything Jesus died for us to have. So I knew there was this promised land out there of life and joy and freedom. But how on earth do I get there? Like, that was the question. So I had been wrestling with this for a while, and my church started doing a study of the purpose-driven life. We broke into small groups to work through the book together, and the first night my group met, there was a young woman about my age who was talking about the pressures of working in full-time ministry. She loved her work, but it was very draining. And I was drawn to her after the group, and I asked what she did. She was the director of the West Side Pregnancy Resource Center. Like, what? Okay, Lord, I hear you. I told her what was going on. She said they had a post-abortion Bible study starting soon. I immediately signed up, and ultimately God worked through that group to truly change my life. You see, I knew God forgave me for what I had done and loved me unconditionally, even my family. You know what my parents said when I finally told them about the abortion? They said, "We are so sorry that you felt like you couldn't come to us." Turns out that expectation of perfection, that wasn't something they put on me. It was something I put on myself. And I was so afraid to let them down that I didn't even give them the chance to show me love when I needed it the most. That is just so sad. But even though I had love and forgiveness from God and my family, I could not love or forgive myself. What I had done was too terrible. I went into that recovery group not convinced that forgiveness and freedom was truly possible, but I had to at least try. And week after week, as I struggled through my homework and cried and talked through all of the pain and anger and remorse with this group of women who really understood, I finally experienced complete forgiveness and was able to grieve the loss of my child. We ended our study with a memorial service, as many groups do, and ours was held on that same beach in Santa Monica where I had been baptized for rededication. But this time, rather than celebrating new life, I was mourning a life lost. We honored our children and said goodbye, and there is a song that I think captures that moment like nothing I've ever heard. My friend Sarah Hart wrote this song in the hope it might bring healing to those who've lost a child through miscarriage or abortion, and it's called Child of My Heart.
Hold you close to me. you want.